Good evening and welcome to the St. Louis Zoo. My name is Jim Jordan, and it's my pleasure to be involved with the science seminar series now for about 12 years, representing the zoo in conjunction with the Academy of Science. We had an incredible turnout for our first program, the last Polar Bears, and we have a good crowd tonight. I'm not sure, you may be doing a straw poll here and seeing how you are involved in different life decisions here, so you have to answer accurately if that's the case. But I'd like to mention that we're going to have a book signing after tonight's program, so we'll have a question and answer period, and then after that, Dr. Thaler will go outside to sign books, so we won't have the opportunity for people to come up front and ask questions like we sometimes do, because we want to allow people to purchase a book if they're interested and then have it signed. Our next science seminar is on Wednesday, December 3rd, the Wednesday immediately following Thanksgiving. And for this one, Dr. George Johnson is going to be looking at how Human Genome Project and the genomics informs us on evolution. And besides looking at probably the human genome, there's been many other genome projects looking at things from honeybees to fruit flies and various plants and microbes. So we hope that you can join us for that. Next Wednesday, here in the Living World, the Conservation Forum is taking place, and it's focusing on the Galapagos Islands and conservation with the Galapagos. That is free. You're welcome to attend, and at this point, you don't have to turn in a reservation. It begins at 6 o'clock, and our keynote session is from 7:30 to 9. So if you're interested in the Galapagos and the unique flora and fauna, we invite you to attend. The zoo is also doing a Galapagos trip this upcoming year in June also. And then one other final thing, if people are interested in our conservation conversation series at the zoo, we have a program coming up later on this month that's going to focus on our chimp group and how we have taken, if you will, foster individuals from different chimp families throughout the U.S. and have combined them into our functional chimp group here and learn more about what was involved in that. And the fall program schedule is out on the front table if you're interested in that. So I'd like to turn it over to Mary Burke, the Executive Director of the Academy of Science, who will introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Jim. You know, the Academy of Science does a lot of seminars like this throughout the greater St. Louis area, but our absolute favorite, is this one that happens here at the zoo, and we're very appreciative to be doing this. I'm going to give the world's quickest summary of who we are for those of you who may not know. The Academy of Science is 152 years old. The Academy of Science of St. Louis, older than the national academies. We were started by a group of scientists who felt like it was really important to promote the public understanding and appreciation of science. And that is still our mission today, which is why we hold these free science seminars. We have the Greater St. Louis Science Fair, one of the largest in the country. We acknowledge outstanding St. Louis scientists. We have a Junior Academy of Science. Many of you belong to that. And our whole mission is to really spread the word about science and all of the aspects of science to the public. And we're funded through wonderful contributions from the public, so that's who we are. Thank you all for coming. I do want to mention that we have some brochures also out front, not just for the series here, but this is like a sample of what you would receive via email if you sign up on the list tonight, and you'll find out about all of the other wonderful things that we have going on. It is a distinct pleasure to welcome Dr. Richard Thaler. He's a pioneering economist, considered by many to be the inventor of behavioral economics, a field that integrates psychological research and economic theory. He's the co-author of Nudge, as you well know, and he's the Ralph and Dorothy Keller Distinguished Service Professor of Behavioral Science and Economics at the Graduate School of Business at the University of Chicago. Dr. Thaler is the director of the University Center for Decision Research. He's one of the pioneers of behavioral finance and is a principal in Fuller and Thaler Asset Management Incorporated, which puts the lessons of behavioral finance to work in equities markets. Daniel Kahneman, the 2002 Economic Sciences Nobel laureate, cited his joint work with Dr. Thaler as a major factor in his receiving the prize. So we're very, very thrilled to have him with us tonight. Please welcome Dr. Thaler.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks, all of you, for coming out, and it's very nice to be here. So I should say something about what I'm doing in a zoo. You can see this is a book about elephants, and so it's perfectly appropriate that I be here. Let me say also something about my co-author, Cass Sunstein, who is a dear friend of mine. We were colleagues together. Technology. How about that? Is that better? Okay. Should I start over? Did you miss anything? No. I made a bad joke about the elephants. It's okay. I was going to say something about Cass Sunstein, who, with whom I wrote this book. We were colleagues together at the University of Chicago from the time I arrived there until 1995. For some obscure reason, he has taken a step down the academic ladder and has moved to a law school in Cambridge, Massachusetts, that will go nameless. But Cass is almost certainly the most distinguished constitutional scholar of his generation. And you might wonder what a constitutional lawyer and a renegade economist are doing writing a book together. We just started talking about things. We wrote a few papers together. And Cass likes writing books. And some of his friends say he thinks with his fingers. So, one day I woke up and we had a book. So that's that. When we set out to write this book, we had two goals in mind. An ambitious goal and a ridiculously ambitious goal. The ambitious goal was to take the research that I and others, like my friend Danny Kahneman that was mentioned in the introduction, the research we've been doing for the last 30 years or so, and try to present it in a way that was approachable to a lay audience, and more important, sketch out how the ideas from behavioral economics might be applied to some of the most pressing problems that our society faces, and in ways that can be implemented both in the public sector and the private sector. So that was our ambitious goal. Our ridiculously ambitious goal was to sketch out a sort of political philosophy that is neither left nor right and might possibly land somewhere in that vast chasm between our two increasingly polarized political parties. So I'll let you be the judge about how well we succeeded at either of these goals, and maybe we can talk about some of that in the question and answer. Now, let me begin by saying what behavioral economics is. And to do so, let me offer a definition by Herb Simon, who was, you can think of as a predecessor of behavioral economics. And he was a guy who has a Ph.D. from the University of Chicago, actually, and then did a lot of very interesting work on artificial intelligence. And so he defines behavioral economics. He says it appears to be a pleonasm, which is a $1,000 word. It means a redundant phrase. And so why does it appear to be a redundant phrase? Well, he asks, what other kind of economics might there be? Presumably, economics is about behavior, and so what else would there be? And he answers that puzzle by saying, the answer to that question lies in the particular assumptions of economics. So what are those particular assumptions? In the book, we describe two kinds of creatures that we call humans and econs. Humans, you know, that's us. Econs are imaginary creatures that exist only in economics textbooks. And they have three qualities that I'm going to talk about. The first is bounded rationality. So econs are really smart. They can solve any problem. And in fact, they are kind of amusingly as smart as the smartest economist. And here's what I mean by that. Let's suppose that I write down some model of some economic behavior in which the agents in the economy, the econs, solve some problem. And I come up with a pretty neat solution as to what would be a smart thing for them to do. And the way economics works is you then assume that's what they all do, since they're econs. So, okay, that's a pretty good model. And then some bright young guy comes along and thinks of an even cleverer thing for the agents in this economy to do. And the way the norms of economic work is his model is taken to be better than my model because his agents are smarter than my agents. So over the last 50 years, economic agents have gotten smarter and smarter. Econs have gotten smarter and smarter. Unfortunately, the rest of us are no smarter than we were before. So there's been a departure that the economic models are describing ever less realistic people, whereas we're still like Joe the plumber, I guess. One of the features of bounded rationality is bounded attention. So we have trouble paying attention to more than one thing at a time, particularly us guys. And so, you know, you guys are trying to pay attention to me, and some of you are also checking your email or thinking about what you have to do tomorrow. And so we live in a very busy life where we try to pay attention to all the things we need to, but we often get distracted, and that creates a problem. The second feature, the second way in which econs and humans differ is that econs do not have self-control problems. They, if they go to a restaurant and someone wheels the dessert cart up, not a problem. You know, they were planning to go home and have a non-fat yogurt for dessert, and they're sticking to that plan. Econs never are hungover on New Year's Day and have no reason to make New Year's resolutions. why would you need to make a resolution when you do just the right thing all the time? So you can see these econs are kind of unfun, right? They're not the sort of people you want to hang out with. Some people would say they're modeled on economists, but I won't go there. I won't go there. So we humans, at least since the time of Adam and Eve, actually have self-control problems. At least when there are apples and snakes around. It's actually, guys are really okay unless there are women involved. It's really the women that cause all the world's problems. But there are women, so we have bounded willpower, and it matters. 20% of Americans are obese. The U.S. savings rate is 0. And 0 isn't good if people have to take care of their own retirement. We become a debtor society and are paying the price. And so it's important to recognize the role that self-control has in understanding human behavior. The third feature of humans, and this is actually a good thing, humans are nicer than econs. Econs are unboundedly unscrupulous. And so, suppose you go up to somebody and you ask them what time it is. You say, what time is it? And you say, well, let's see, it's 5 to 8. Now, most of us just react that way. We look at our watch and we announce the time. That's not what an econ does. An econ thinks, this is a strategic opportunity. So, suppose you're out in the lobby and somebody was asking you what time it was. You might think, now let's see, if I tell them it's actually 5 minutes earlier, then I'll go in and be able to get a better seat. Right? So the econs are always thinking that, well, yes, I could tell the truth if that's in my best interest, but if lying would help me, then I'll do that. And so, as I say, it's fortunate that humans are a little more moral than econs. The world would be in an even bigger mess otherwise. But that's the third important way in which humans and econs differ. Now so behavioral economics is a combination of those three things, which are descriptions of humans, and of course I'm simplifying this, there's hundreds of years of psychology research in each one of these aspects, plus some economics, and there what we're interested in is models of markets in which some of the agents are humans. And traditional economic theory is all about markets where all the agents are econs. So we have all these really smart people competing against one another. In the real world, we have some smart and some not so smart, and some trustworthy and some not so trustworthy, and they're all competing, and the outcomes are different. Now, there's a whole field of research called behavioral finance, which has been one of the things I've spent a lot of my time doing over the last 20 years. There's a big debate about whether markets are efficient. I should say there had been a big debate about whether markets are efficient. That debate has officially been declared over. Monday, I think, was the last day it was permissible to take the position that markets are completely efficient, but not knowing that Monday's 10% rise in prices all around the world would happen, I brought with me a single picture that I claim is the single best evidence against the best evidence against the principle, the driving principle of economic theory, which is something called the law of one price. The law of one price basically says that no object can simultaneously sell for two different prices. And the reason for that is somebody would buy the cheap one and sell at the expensive price, and it would go away. Okay? So here's my proof that that's wrong. Now, this is an actual picture of a sign in Buenos Aires, an orange juice stand. Now, some of my economist friends have argued, well, no, this is not a violation of the law of one price. What this is rational price discrimination on the part of the seller. It's a way of taking advantage of stupid Americans who not only don't realize that the phrase below is Spanish for orange juice, but also don't notice that the pictures are identical. So in any case, that's all I'm going to say about market efficiency, though of course you're welcome to ask about that in the question period. So here's the approach to public policy that we advocate, and we give it the very nice term libertarian paternalism. Now, these are possibly two of the least popular words in America today. Libertarians, some of my best friends are libertarians, but we have lots of libertarians at the University of Chicago, and there are libertarians in a few rural counties in Montana. But otherwise, libertarians are thought to be some sort of weird anarchists and are considered to be the lunatic fringe on the right. But libertarians are popular compared to paternalists, who are the most reviled of all creatures. Think Ralph Nader, who got the honor of being equally hated by the right and the left. The left blame him for losing in 2000, and the right hate him on merit. Okay, here's an idea for a book. We're going to take two contradictory, reviled concepts and combine them and write a book about it. So that was our idea. You know, we had a lot of funny looks. We were not allowed, as you saw, the phrase does not appear on the cover of the book. We were not allowed to do that. But nevertheless, that's what the book's about. And what we say is, at least the way we use those terms, they are neither contradictory nor, we think actually, they're lovable. So let me define terms. By libertarian, all I mean is that we think we should respect people's right to choose. So all policies that I talk about tonight, or that we talk about in the book, have that property, that we don't force anybody to do anything. And we don't think people should be forced to do anything if we can avoid it. I mean, there are some, we have to have laws against murder and the like, so we have to have some rules. But what we're going to try to do is go as far as we can in devising policies that don't put bans or mandates. So that's the libertarian part. The paternalistic part is simply saying that all else equal, we would like people to choose well, and to choose well as judged by themselves. So it's not that we think Sunstein and Thaler know what's best for you and that you should choose as we do, that would be a problem because he and I have very different tastes. I like wine, he hates wine. You know, that was almost an insurmountable barrier to our writing the book. But we solved the problem. I drink the whole bottle. So it's not that we think we know what's best for you, nor do we think that John McCain or Barack Obama know what's best for you, or that they should. It's that we think we should design societies in ways that people make better choices as judged by themselves. I mean, to give an example, if out there somebody asked you, where is the lecture, and your inclination was to point toward this room, then you qualify as a paternalist by our definition, because you have a pretty good idea that if they were asking where to get to the lecture, then they really wanted to go to the lecture and not to McDonald's. Now, how do we do this trick? We do it with something we call choice architecture. Now, who is a choice architect? A choice architect is anyone who designs the environment in which people make decisions. So the zoo here had an architect. There must be zoo architects, I guess. But I don't know whether they had a choice architect, but inadvertently the zoo architect acts as a choice architect, because the way I've never been to the zoo here, but I live across from the Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago, so I go in there all the time, and there's a natural path one takes through the zoo, and that natural path means it's more likely that you see some exhibits than others. So the zoo architect is a choice architect. Similarly, suppose you go to a restaurant and there's a menu. Whoever designed that menu was a choice architect. They decided how to arrange the food. Are the cold appetizers and the warm appetizers in the same category or in separate categories? What about the salads? Is there a separate pasta category? And then what about the order of the foods within category? And then some restaurants, they'll take one word in a menu description and put it in bold. Which word? Is it the chicken or the mole? Well, that will influence what people eat. For a while, we were thinking about, as a title of this book, Everything Matters. Because that's really a description of the problem and opportunity that we face. Everything matters. Everything alters choices. So the choice architect has immense power. And the choice architect can use that power for good or evil. And this is a book about using choice architecture for good, though I'm sure some people will read it and use it for other purposes. Now, here's the most important point to take away from this lecture, or from the book for that matter. It is impossible to have a neutral choice architecture. That's when the Science Center, where we were earlier, is a new building. So there was an architect who built that building. So I'm sure the architect got some money and said, you know, you have this many square feet, and this is your budget, and we want to have the following exhibits, and okay, build a building. The architect can't then build an abstract building. It has to be a real building. It's got to have a door. It has to have parking. It has to have toilets. And there's going to be a path, again, that people are going to take. Maybe they'll start at the top and work their way down, or vice versa. All of that is choice architecture as well as architecture. You can't get around it. You can't just say, no, I prefer not to be a choice architect. You're stuck with it. Consider the following example. Suppose that you are the head of the St. Louis School District cafeterias. You have some master's degree in nutrition, and your job is to feed St. Louis's children. And you decide, it'd be interesting to run some experiments. And you run some experiments and you notice that the order in which the food is displayed influences the choices the kids make. If you put the apples ahead of the Twinkies, the kids eat more apples and fewer Twinkies. Now the question is, what use should you make of that information? Well, one possibility would be to try to influence, to nudge the kids to be as healthy as possible. Say, to eat what their mothers would like them to eat. I mean, whatever, you can decide what criteria you would put in there. We probably don't want the 6-year-olds deciding what they would like to eat. But, you needn't do that one. Maybe, you could choose to fatten the kids up. Maybe you have a fat kid and he gets picked on in school, and you think that if you fatten up all the other kids, your kid won't get picked on as much. So there are lots of choices here. Maybe you think you should make a principled choice not to be a choice architect, and so you fool yourself into thinking, oh, I can avoid this altogether. I'll display the food at random. Though, of course, that is an arrangement. It will slow the lines down impossibly long if you put the peanut butter in one place and the jelly in another, because the food is displayed at random. It's going to take kids a long time to make their peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. But or you could decide to feature the items that you get the biggest bribes from suppliers. So all of these are options. The point is, you got to pick something. So given that you have to pick something, why not pick something good? Now, the next point is that some designs are better than others. Chances are, if you have a stove at home, it looks like this one on the left. It has 4 burners, and then it has 4 knobs here in the front, and obviously these 2 knobs control those 2 burners, and these 2 control those 2 burners. And if you're in the back of the room, you probably can't read the print down here. And if so, that puts you in exactly the same situation as someone my age who's standing at the stove and turning it on. And I find I have a stove like that in my apartment in Chicago. And when I turn on one of these burners, I'm about 60-40 to turn the right one, which is better than chance, but not that much better. Now, compare that stove with this one. Here we haven't labeled the knobs, but no one would ever make a mistake about which knob to turn. So the point is that there are good designs and bad designs. Why not have good ones? This example, by the way, comes from a wonderful book by a guy called Don Norman called The Design of Everyday Things. If you're interested in design, it's a manifesto for good design. Now, you thought that you were coming to a classy talk. This is a picture of a urinal. Ladies, if you always wanted to know what a urinal looks like, here is one from the Amsterdam airport. Now, you can see there's something in there. I'm going to blow that up for you. This is the image of a housefly that has been etched into the urinal down there near the drain. Now, here, let me give you an interesting bit of psychology. If I reach up and touch that fly, it grosses people out. Like if I go up to this guy and now I want to shake hands with him, he doesn't want to shake hands with me, right? Now, it's okay for me to pet the elephants, right? It's not that the screen is dirty, but petting the fly in the urinal, I mean, there's great psychology experiments that show that people won't eat a piece of chocolate that has been shaped in the shape of a cockroach. They find that revolting. So anyway, I digress. Here's the idea about this housefly image. An economist, believe it or not, an economist got this idea. Now, it turns out that, you remember I mentioned bounded attention. When men are doing their business, they are not paying full attention to the task at hand. However, it turns out that if you give them a target to aim at, they aim. I think there's some evolutionary thing. Maybe you guys at the zoo can it'd be interesting to do some research with the chimps on this, I think. But meanwhile, and here you can implement this here at the zoo, here's the interesting thing. Putting those houseflies in reduces spillage by 80%. You give them a target, they'll aim, you know. So that housefly, this example appears in the book. It probably is one short paragraph. There's no aspect of the book that has been written about more than that housefly. And it has, in my mind, become my image of a nudge. So that housefly is a nudge. So let me define a nudge. A nudge is a small feature of the environment that captures our attention and influences our behavior. And that's what nudging is all about. So we have a chapter on choice architecture in the book. And we talk about the principles of good choice architecture. I don't have time tonight to go into all of them. You have to buy the book if you want to learn about the whole thing. But let me talk about the first three principles: defaults, expect error, and give feedback. Defaults are what happens if you do nothing. So the definition of a default option is it's what happens if you do nothing. So normally what happens if you do nothing is nothing, right? If you just sit there in your chair, nothing will happen. If you stand up, something may happen, the chair will pop up. Now, normally, like if you're working on your computer and you do nothing, nothing happens unless you do nothing long enough. Then the screensaver will come on. Or maybe the computer locks itself. How long it takes for those things to happen, those were default options. So your computer came preset with how long it would take for the screensaver to come on and what the screensaver would be and whether it locks itself. Chances are you've never changed those. So the main principle of defaults is that they're sticky. Think about the television networks. Why do they spend so much time thinking about what show should follow what other show? The reason is that we've all found ourselves just watching one show after another one, even though the cost of switching is one thumb click. And notice they've gotten very tricky about this. On some of the networks, they've changed the commercials around, so there's no longer that big commercial break on the hour. And that way, the reason for that is one show goes right into the next one, and that means that the viewers will be stickier. So this is the power of default options. Now, how can we use that? One of the most important applications of this has been in the design of 401k plans. If your employer offers a 401k plan and there's a match, as there are in most 401ks, then you're an idiot if you don't join. And so it's a good idea to join your 401k plan because your employer is giving you free money and then allowing you to invest it tax-free for a long time, right? So it's good to join. Many people somehow never get around to it. Now, in a typical plan, what happens is when you're first eligible for the plan, you get a pile of forms to fill out. How much do you want to save, and then how do you want to invest, and which fund, and then you get some book with a whole bunch of funds, and many people pull out their hair and say, well, I'll figure this out tomorrow. Under automatic enrollment, what happens is the first day you're eligible for that plan, you get that same pile of forms, but the top page says, you're now eligible for the 401k plan, and if you don't fill out these forms, we're going to enroll you in this savings rate and in these investments. That's just changing the default. Well, that has a huge effect. In one plan that was one of the first ones to be studied, enrollment at the initial date went from 65% to 95%. Boom. You want to make people save? Make it easy. That's the first principle of nudging. Give feedback. People don't learn unless they get feedback. If you want to help people learn, you give them better feedback. Here's an example. If you paint a ceiling, you're almost always painting a ceiling white. Ceilings are usually painted white. What that means is you're painting a white ceiling with white paint. It's very easy to miss a spot because you're not getting feedback on what you're painting. What you're painting looks like the same color as what you're painting. Some genius invented a kind of ceiling paint that goes on pink and turns white when it dries. Right? That provides feedback. Or think about digital cameras. One of the many ways in which digital cameras are better than their film predecessors is when you take a picture, you get feedback right away. You see the image. Those of us who are old enough to remember film cameras all have experienced a day of happily shooting pictures and then discovering we had forgotten to put the film in the camera. Right? So that's because there was no feedback loop. So again, we can make this stuff practical. There's an invention called the ambient orb. This might make a nice demonstration over at the Science Center. You install this in people's homes, and it's just a light bulb. And the more energy the home is using, the brighter the bulb lights up. And just putting that into homes reduced energy use by 40% in peak periods. Didn't change any prices. There's an important lesson here. The economist's solution to all problems is to change the price. If we want to reduce energy use, raise the price. Well, that's true. I mean, getting the prices right is the correct first principle. But the second, and maybe just as important principle is, prices matter most when they're most salient. All the uproar we had about gasoline prices was because it's in your face. When you go fill up the tank, you get a bill right there, $80. And it used to be $50. And, you know, if you're like me, if I go to the grocery store and I'm throwing things in the cart, I have no idea what the prices of anything are. And then I get there and, you know, it'll be $50 one time and $100 another time. But that's mostly because, you know, I was buying different things. And so I don't really know. If the price of milk had doubled, I wouldn't have known. But the gasoline price was in your face. Now imagine if on your home thermostat, when you turned the thermostat down on a hot day because you're feeling uncomfortable, suppose it gave you a readout, $12 an hour it's going to cost you to be cooler. Are you sure, you know? The first time I visited Paris about 30 years ago and ventured into the subway, if you've ever been in the Paris subway, you know, you get a little ticket that's like the size of a movie ticket, and you stick it in the front, and it pops up on the top and prints something on it or something. Now, the tickets have a magnetic stripe on one side and some writing on the other side. So I'm looking at this thing, and je ne parle pas français, so I just, you know, wasn't sure how to use it. But so I'm an experimentalist. I stick it in with the magnetic stripe up. It works. Okay, one problem solved. And for the next 30 years, I religiously used the Paris metro the right way. Then I was living in Paris for 5 months a few years ago, and was showing some friends around now that I was a native. And I'm saying, well, you go in the subway, it's very important to put the ticket in this way, until my wife starts laughing at me, which she does often. And I said, what are you laughing at? She says, well, it doesn't matter which way you put it in. So the reason why I had been using the Paris subway perfectly for 30 years is there's no wrong way. Any way you stick that coupon in works. Now, compare that to the parking garages in downtown Chicago. I don't know whether the garages in St. Louis work this way, but in Chicago, you stick your credit card in when you come in into some machine, and it remembers you. And then when you leave, you drive up to the gate, and there's some machine there, and you push your window down, and you reach up, and you have to stick your credit card in. Now, there are 4 ways to put the credit card in, right? Up, down, left, right. One way works. There's some sign there that, for some reason, people have difficulty deciphering. And so you're often behind some idiot that's sticking his card in, and it comes out, and the gate doesn't go up. And truth is, sometimes you are that idiot. And now, think about what happens, though, again, because there's also the feedback problem here. So you put the card in, right? You're not paying much attention. You put it in, you take it out, you look, the gate didn't go up. Okay, now what mistake did I make? All right? Maybe I put the wrong card in. I put the Visa. I should have put the MasterCard. No, I'm pretty sure it was the Visa. Well, maybe I put it in the wrong way. Oh, which way did I put it in? Right? You know, remember, you're holding it here. And so now, you think, all right, this is just an amusing example, but the design of this is to save labor, right? It's so they don't have to have somebody, a cashier. If you go to the Chicago Symphony and you park in the garage right in front, right across the street on Michigan Avenue, after the performances, they have people paid to stand there by the machines and put the credit card in the right way. And that's because if they didn't, there would still be people there, you know, from last season waiting to get out. Now, while we were writing the book, we got a really mean and nasty email from somebody, I won't mention his name. Let's just refer to him as our publisher. And so it got us thinking that we've all made the mistake of writing a really mean, emotional email and regretting it from the minute we pressed the send key, right? I mean, is there anybody in the room who hasn't done that? So this guy claims yes. He's never sent an email then, or is a liar, one or the other. So, or is an econ. That's a third possibility. So here's the idea. Here's our idea. This is in the sci-fi world. We want some kid, this kid, when you grow up, invent this. We need software that detects emotionally laden emails. Now, it's not that it detects four-letter words. Eudora had that program. That was useless. You can have perfectly nice emails with four-letter words and vice versa. What we need is an emotion detector. But so here's the way this would work. You write this mean email, you press send, you get a message that says, this appears to be an emotionally laden email. Now, the default option would now be to send this email to purgatory, which would be some file hidden deep in the bowels of your C drive, and it would be kind of hard to find. And it would stay there forever unless you went and rescued it and sent it. But we'd make the user would get to decide what the options are. Maybe you'd have to solve some puzzle in order to send it. Now, I gave a talk about this stuff at Google last spring when the book first came out. And I noticed that recently they've come out with a new feature. It's not quite this, but it's like I think it was inspired by this, but it's aimed at young people, which is a feature that if you're sending emails late at night on weekends, it asks you the same thing. So this is a sobriety check. And I think maybe you have to solve some puzzle in order to send the email. So, okay, well, here's a more practical application, because this is something we've actually done. About 10 years ago, I was asked to speak to the clients of a large mutual fund company, and they asked me if I could talk about how we could get people to save more. So I said, okay, I'd think about that. And I ended up proposing something that I've come to call Save More Tomorrow. And here's the idea. We all know we have more self-control in the future than right now. So the idea is you write to people and you ask them, would you like to increase your saving rate, not now, but when you get your next raise? And then set up a plan where every time you get a raise, your contribution rates go up. The first company that we got to do this, we tripled saving rates. And so this plan is almost certainly now available at the company you work for if your plan is administered by one of the large retirement plan administrators. Your employer may not have told you about it, but it's probably there lurking in the background. If not, ask about it. this is the easiest way to increase your 401k contributions. You sign up for this, the next thing you know, a few years later, you're saving the max. Okay, here's the new idea that got hatched while we were writing this book. It doesn't sound sexy, but I think it's actually potentially very important and could have helped us avoid the current catastrophe we're now in. The idea is simple, that for all financial products, not just financial products, even cell phones and the like, anywhere where the government requires a disclosure form of terms, like the 12-page thing you get with your cell phone plan or your credit card. So in addition to those 12 pages that no one ever reads except that guy, you read them, I bet, right? Yeah. So, or he writes them, I think, actually. So in addition to that, you would get 2 machine-readable files. So here's the way this would work for credit cards. You would, once a year, you'd get these 2 files. One would be essentially like a spreadsheet. It would list all the ways the credit card company can charge you for things. So if you miss a payment and they charge you $50 and they raise your interest rate by 100 basis points, that's in the spreadsheet. If you take a trip to Canada and they charge you 2% for foreign transactions, that's in there. All the formulas for how they charge you are in there. The second file is a list of all the things you did in the past year that incurred charges. Now, it's not like we think anybody would look at those files. What we are extremely confident about, because we've talked to a bunch of firms that would like to get into this business, is that websites would immediately emerge that would serve as translators. So what you would do is you got this file, you'd go to creditcardhelper.com, one click, and it would tell you, oh, you know what your credit card company is doing to you? And then so they would tell you how you're being charged. They would explain how you could improve your behavior if you want to change your fees. And they would tell you, if what you're going to do is this, like you did last year, maybe you should switch to this other credit card company that doesn't charge for foreign transactions. So if you travel, here's a hint. If you do a lot of foreign travel, you want Capital One. They don't charge for foreign transactions. Everybody else does. My nomination for the single worst bit of choice architecture in the history of government is Medicare Part D. Now, that's a bold claim, but I've been making it, and no one has come up to tell me of something worse. So if you know of a worse plan, we want to hear about it, but I'm sticking to my guns. This is the worst ever. So now, it's not that the program is bad, mind you. Giving the elderly prescription drug insurance is an admirable thing for the government to do. We can have an argument about whether the government should or shouldn't do that. I'm not here to have that argument. What I'm going to say is, this isn't the way you want to go about it. So here's what they did. They said, we want to do this, but we want competition, and we want it at the state level. So each state has a different plan, and typically there are 50 or more insurance plans within each state, and they differ from state to state. Now notice the fact that they differ from state to state means that it's difficult for national media to write anything sensible about this, because a good plan in Missouri isn't the same as a good plan in Kansas, because it may not exist in Kansas. Now, when the plan was first rolled out, it was an opt-in system. And there was lots of advertising to people of the right age group to join up to this plan, which was a good deal for the elderly. But to figure out which plan you wanted, what you had to do was type in a list of all the drugs you were taking and the dosages. Now, just for one example, there's no spell checker on this website. And drug names are like strings of random, right? And if you type Xanax with a Z instead of an X, you don't get the Google, did you mean? You get the government, huh. Now, as I said, this was an opt-in system. There was no default plan, but there was a subset of participants, people who had been covered by Medicaid, so people who are below some income level. They were required to switch from the old Medicaid system to the Medicare system. In the trade, these are called the dual eligibles, because they're eligible for Medicaid and Medicare. Now, since they were required to switch, they had to have a default, because what if they don't switch, right? So the government thinks, all right, what are we going to pick as the default for them? I'd let you guess, but we're running out of time. The default they picked was random. This is not well known. How many people in this room knew about that? Yeah, about 3. Okay, so and they probably read the book. So, I mean, it didn't publicize this fact, but that's a terrible way to pick a default. It's not hard to predict which plan is going to be the least expensive next year, because if you're old, the drugs you take next year are the drugs you take this year plus 1. Right? That's what you have to look forward to. So, I mean, you get on drugs, you never get off them. So it's very easy to write a program to say, here are the drugs you're taking now, here are the 6 plans. These dual eligibles are not given the whole list. They have to pick among 6. Of the 6, this one or these 2 are probably the best. And so the state of Maine implemented that. They called it intelligent assignment. And they are probably saving $400 or $500 per person by picking a plan smart instead of picking at random. Other states wanted to follow this and they got blocked by the Bush administration for reasons that are not exactly clear. But the state of Florida wanted to do it. So here's one hint as to why someone would be against this. In the state of Florida, they wanted to do it. There was a lawsuit preventing the state of Florida from doing it. Who filed the lawsuit? One of the insurance companies that was getting people into this through the random default mechanism. Now, think, if you're an insurance company, what's a good business to go into? Have an expensive, bad insurance plan, and then just take 1/n share of the market, right? That's great. I mean, if I had thought of that, I would have gone into that business. So they saw somebody coming in to take that business away from them, and they filed a lawsuit, and it hasn't happened. Okay. I need to finish up here. You know, I'm from the University of Chicago, so I need to answer why markets don't solve these problems. Here's basically the answer. You need to think about the role of markets And some of you are old enough to remember flight insurance. It used to be you go to the airport, there would be a counter where there would be a guy selling a life insurance policy good for one airplane trip. It was a bad thing to buy. It's like extended warranties. You shouldn't buy them. So don't buy extended warranties. Don't buy flight insurance. Now, how could markets solve this problem? Let's suppose the economics of this is they are selling this policy for $25. Its actuarial value is $1, and it costs them $22 to sell it by renting a space in an airport and paying somebody to sit there all day convincing people to sell it. So it's not that they're getting rich selling this bad policy, right? So it's not that somebody else is going to come in and sell the policy for $1. That's not going to happen. So the market doesn't work that way. You could imagine, okay, somebody will set up a booth across the hall selling the advice, don't buy flight insurance. But right, nobody's going to go into that business either. So if you think about how this relates to the mortgage crisis, some of the worst mortgage brokers that were really preying on unsophisticated, poor borrowers were basically winning the battle by being the sleaziest mortgage broker. And that's the way some markets work. It's not going to be the survival of the honestest. It's going to be the guy who most disguises the truth about that mortgage because his mortgage is going to sound better than the guy who admits, oh yeah, well, it is true that your rates are going to double in a year, but I didn't think you really needed to know that. So markets will not necessarily solve these problems. Okay, 2 objections. I'll get these out so you can have smarter ones on your own. People often remind me, don't I realize that people who work for the government are boundedly rational too? Yes. I want to stipulate to that. It has occurred to me that some of our leaders don't have a full deck. Let's just say that. Okay? So I own up to that. It's not that I think, as I said before, it's not that I think that we should be asking John McCain or Barack Obama to be making decisions for us. I like this state of Maine example. The governor of the state of Maine isn't picking insurance policies for people. He hired a couple programmers and a couple doctors as consultants to write a program, and that does it. Right? Of course, that we don't want the president deciding what we should eat for dinner. We want to have a president who makes it easier for us to make decisions that are good for us. Slippery slopes is the other thing I hear. Oh, if we do this, first we'll have automatic enrollment, next we'll have prohibition. You know, we've had Save More Tomorrow for 10 years. I've seen no signs of prohibition. My rule is, let's have a ban on slippery slope arguments. I think they're dangerous. Let's stop at the appropriate place to stop until we see empirical evidence of slipperiness. And I don't know of any such evidence. So, to conclude, humans are imperfect. We need all the help we can get. It's possible to improve choices without restricting options. Don't use bans and mandates. Just nudge. Thank you. So we have time for some questions. Don't be shy. Yes, sir.
Another book that talks about good designs is entitled simply By Design. You might find it interesting to find that in the library some years old. The question I have is, the one thing you have
Yeah, I mean, marketing is all about nudging. So we didn't invent nudging. Madison Avenue has known about nudging as long as there's been Madison Avenue. So what we're trying to do, if you think about this recap, this machine-readable disclosure idea, that's an attempt to blow away the smoke. So I think that the antidote to deceptive advertising, or to just effective advertising, because the line between deception and effective is a pretty fuzzy one, is transparency. And so most of the policy proposals we make in the book are about making it easier for people to figure out what's really going on, because we know that the marketers are out there marketing. That's what they do. That's what marketing is. It's nudging. Yes, sir.
I'm wondering how you would propose to implement this transparency in the face of the tremendous financial, capitalist, if you will, power associated with marketing.
Well,
There's a lot of money to be made there, which is why it's done.
yeah, I mean, look, there is huge call now for greater financial regulation. I could have made this whole talk about the current crisis, but I figured we're all sick of that. Yeah. I think what I am pushing is that at least some of our efforts toward regulation in these industries be aimed at more disclosure rather than rules and mandates. So, for example, consider mortgages. I much prefer our approach of making the terms of the mortgage more transparent than alternative approaches I've heard, which is let's eliminate subprime mortgages. Let's forbid adjustable rate mortgages. No, that's not. We don't want to ban innovation. So yes, I mean, if you regulate some sector of the economy, they're going to push back. I've talked to the credit card industry about this proposal. You know, they say, at least outside of, not in front of the media, but what they've told me, I met with about 6 credit card providers. They said it would cost them almost nothing to do what I want, because they have to do it anyway in written terms, and so the electronic disclosure is basically free. And that there would be winners and losers, and it would hurt the sleazier operators. And so I think that, I mean, if God forbid I was the Secretary of Treasury, I would try to co-opt the big banks like Citibank and Bank of America and say, look, this is actually going to help you guys because it will make it harder for the sleazy guys to get market share through deceptive means. So that would be the approach that I would try to take. But I'm not a politician. I'm the only person in the country not running for office on Tuesday. You're not an econ? Okay, that's good. That's good. Yes, sir.
What's the difference between libertarian paternalism and asymmetric paternalism?
Wow. That's a deep reader. Asymmetric paternalism is a term coined by 6 friends of ours. Kellen Kammer, George Lowenstein, Matthew Rabin, Sam Zakharoff. I'm missing a couple. Their idea is that we should design policies that help the least sophisticated and inflict as little harm as possible on the sophisticated. It's a close cousin. And we're all friends. Yes?
I have a question regarding the ballot initiative that we're going to be voting on here in the very next meeting. And
Wow.
having difficulty deciding which way to vote on. Your third conclusion is hitting the nail on the head with Proposition C with regard to renewable energy. And it requires utilities in the state to have renewable portfolio standards. They have to buy, they're mandated to buy a certain amount of energy from renewable sources in a certain amount of time. We presently have voluntary standards that are shorter time frame and higher limits. But the mandatory one is a further out time frame and a lower limit. Which do you think would be more effective?
Neither.
That's the third choice.
So I would, personally, I'm not in favor of telling people the best way of achieving some technological goal. So I would be in favor of an emissions tax or a cap and trade system and tell them they do what they want, but if you emit more than X, this is what it's going to cost you.
Assuming that's not one of the choices.
Then I plead the fifth. Yeah.
At one point, I think that, for instance, I thought they had a shared savings thing where if they found a way to do something cheaper, the ratepayers shared it.
Yeah, I think I don't want to get into this because I probably know less about it than anyone in the room.
I mean, it's an idea to another solution.
Right. I mean, we have a chapter on the environment in the book, and we say we like either an emissions tax or a cap and trade system, and supplemented with more salience like that ambient orb. And those are the kinds of approaches. And I would prefer to do that than to tell people, households or industry, you have to reduce your energy usage by 20%. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, somebody that, it's very easy for me to reduce my energy usage at home. I'm hardly at home. A family with 3 kids and a stay-at-home mom is going to use more energy during the day than I am. So we don't want to impose the same, everybody reduce the same way. Make everybody face the prices and adjust the most efficient way they can. All right, we have to hawk some books. So if all questions from now on cost $20 and are available outside.